Hi there. Today I'm going to show you how to use DaVinci Resolve 17 start to finish. This is for the beginner. I'm going to show you how to bring in footage, how to edit it, how to add some effects and text, and then how to render it. This is going to be a bit of a long one, but in the description you'll find some time codes so you can jump just to the section you need. So let's get started. All right, here we go. So I'm going to kind of start you right at the beginning here. So we're going to show you where you can get DaVinci Resolve. So if you go to this website address here, which is www.blackmagicdesign.com, and currently this is what'll come up, and you just scroll down the page till you get to where it says Introducing DaVinci Resolve. Click on that. Scroll down to where it says Download Now. And if you've already graduated to studio version, then you're probably not watching this video. So this is what you're going to be working with here. DaVinci Resolve 17, this is the free version. And there aren't many limitations on it, except for really advanced stuff that you're probably not going to be running into. And by the time you do, you're probably going to want to invest in the studio version, which actually is only like $300 US, so it's not very expensive. And it is available for Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. And they've even got a special version in the Mac OS that's optimized for the M1. So if you're a Mac user, you'll love that. Now in this case, I'm just going to click on the Windows one. And you'll get this form here. So you will have to fill out the information before you can download it, but a small price to pay. And I'm not going to bother actually going through that because it's straightforward from that point once you fill it in. So we can get rid of that. And then you can go ahead and install it. Now I've already got DaVinci Resolve open, and there's not really much I need to show you. Like once you do the install and run it the first time, you're gonna have a window where you can tell it you're creating a new project. And once you've done that, you're gonna actually be brought to this screen here, I believe. It's been a long time since I ran this for the first time. And here's where you can go in and set up your media storage so you can add areas to it and that kind of thing. I'm not going to bother with that, showing you how to use it, because there's really a much easier way. So we're just going to jump to the cut page. I'm going to take you along as I do an actual project for a client. So I did get their permission to use their project as part of this tutorial. So you're going to see me building an actual real project, and there'll be some parts where I fast forward or cut ahead, so you don't have to see all the full little tweaks and tunes that I do to it, but I'm going to show you all the important stuff that you need to know. So now that we're on the cut page, we're going to bring in the project, but just before we get to that, I want to cover a couple little things, and that's organization. So I'm just going to show you how I've got stuff organized for this particular client, since we're going to be working on a project for him. And now this is kind of specific to if you're running like an older style hard drive for your mass data storage to save a little money. And then you've got an SSD that you're using, or even an M.2 drive that you're using as your boot drive. you're going to want to actually do your current projects on that. So what I've done is I've split this up so that I can keep track of projects that are completed, and then I can go back to them later. And then we've got pending projects, stuff that we haven't really decided on, and then just old B-roll and stuff that we're probably never going to use, but we're keeping around because, well, we're hoarders. So, and the reason that you want to do it this way is when you start getting a lot of videos built up, you don't want to have to go back and have to reorganize everything, because that's kind of what I did. I had to go back and reorganize, and it took me hours and hours of moving stuff around and reorganizing. So you'll see we've got quite a few completed projects in here. And this represents about a year's worth of, or actually not quite a year's worth of work for this person. And so this way, you know, we can go back and revisit the projects and that kind of thing. And then for the actual working area where I'm working with, so I've got a, now this one down here is actually all on my hard drive. So I've got a 4 terabyte drive. And then this here is on my SSD. So I've got a current projects folder. You don't need to use any particular method of organizing. I just happen to use this. So I've got, you know, 3 projects that we've kind of got in the current projects area. So I can open that up, and this will be what I bring into the project. And so I'm just going to move this off to the other side here. And then we'll just take these files and we'll highlight them and we'll drag them in. Now, one thing that you should know about DaVinci is when you work on a project, and if you move the original files, then when you go to load the project again, it's going to tell you can't find the files. So you can handle it one of 2 ways. You can either move the files back to your working area where you worked on it last time, or if you just need to look at some stuff and maybe grab a little footage or something, DaVinci has an option where you can just highlight the files. So let me just show you real quick on the edit page. So if it's broken the links, you can come in here, select and right click, and then go relink selected clips. And you don't even have to know the real location. You just have to know what drive it's on. And you give it the drive and then it'll automatically search for you. That was a nice change that they made on version 17. Okay, so let's go back to the cut page. Now, the reason that they have this cut page is when you're dealing with a lot of videos. Now, this isn't a lot, but it's a few. It's much easier to deal with this on the cut page. So you do your raw cuts here, and you get that kind of figured out, and then you take it to the edit page and refine it. And the reason that this works so much easier this way is one feature called source tape. And when we turn source tape on, so if I hit source tape, now it's going to put them all together, and then I can go through and pick out the stuff I want and drag it down to the timeline. And now I actually have an editor keyboard, so I hit a button on there to do it, but to do it just with the interface, you've got these little buttons up here. So you've got source clip, source tape, and timeline. So in this case, you would click on the source tape, and then you can scrub through the footage, and then you need to mark your ins and your outs. So if you go up here to the menu, you notice you've got mark in and out on this menu, or you've got keyboard shortcuts, just the I and the O. So in my case, I'm going to be using my editor keyboard rather than actually pressing on the keyboard itself, like on my main keyboard, because for me it's just a lot faster and it's kind of muscle memory for me at this point. But you do have just the option of the I and the O. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to play a little of the footage here. And now you can either play it at regular speed, or you can actually fast forward through it. So you've got 3 keys on the keyboard that'll control this. So the L key will go forward, the J key back, and the K will pause it. And for the J and the L, if you hit it more than once, then it speeds it up appropriately, depending on how many times you've pressed it. So if I press it once, it'll start to play, or you can press the space bar to play, or you can click on this right here, the play button. So we'll just hit the L key.
Here we are, a little bit closer. You're gonna zoom out a bit.
Let me turn that volume down a bit. Okay, so we'll just hit that again, and then we can hit it again, and if we hit it again, it goes even faster. Now the advantages, one of the other advantages of having it in the timeline like this, or in the source tape line, is it allows you to figure out the proper order, because it doesn't always display in the proper order of the files. So depending on their naming conventions, or whether they even use naming conventions or just let the camera or the phone or whatever they use to record decide on the file names, the order could be all jumbled up. So usually one of the first things you want to do is just kind of scrub through and make sure that you got the right stuff in the right place. And these little vertical white lines, they're showing you the separation between the different clips. So we're just going to go through this real quick. By the way, this is called scrubbing through the timeline. Okay, so sometimes just looking at the footage isn't going to tell you the whole story of what order they should be in. So we're just going to go back and listen at the very beginning of each one, and this will help narrow our focus down a bit.
Here we are, a little bit closer. You're gonna zoom out a bit.
Okay, so that's obviously not really the first one. So that looks like it might be the first one, but we're just going to check the others just to make sure here. Okay. So this might actually be the first one. So we'll just make a mental note. And we'll go to the next one here. Okay, so I think we've got it pretty much figured out. Now I've skipped a little bit of stuff in there because you don't need to see me just sitting there watching footage. You're just here to learn how to do this. So we're just going to go back to what I think is the first one, which I believe is that one right there. Now I'm going to back it up slowly here. Now you can do this on your keyboard if you use the arrow keys. So if a left arrow key will move it back one at a time, one frame at a time. And when you get to the very first one, you can hit your I on the keyboard like so. And then you can drag it to the right near the end. And figure out exactly where it switches there. Okay, so then we'll mark our out point, so O on the keyboard. And then you can either drag it down from here onto your, there's actually 2 timelines in here. And this is one of the reasons that it makes it so nice, because you get a regular timeline view here, but up here, when I add more videos to it or more clips, it's going to show it all together on here, so it's much faster to scroll through it. And now we'll go to the next one. Now I'm going to switch from using the keyboard to the wheel on my editor board. Okay, and then I'll mark my in, and then we're going to scrub down to the end here. Okay, and I'll mark my out. And instead of dragging it down, in my case, I'm going to use the append key on my editor keyboard. So we do have some other options here. We can go up to edit, and you can go down to append to end of timeline, or you can use the keyboard shortcut of Shift F12. But in my case, I'm just going to use my editor board. So now you'll notice that we've got a little black line here that divides these two. So we can jump right from one to the other. And you'll notice that it shows the playhead here. So if I want to scrub through the whole thing really quickly, you can see how it's moving at the bottom. And on this screen, you'll notice that this playhead here doesn't move, but the video moves past it. When you get to the edit tab, it's going to be exactly the opposite. So we can just scrub back to maybe an area that we want to look at, or we can come in here and you can do a smart insert if you discover that a piece of video needs to go back in the middle here somewhere. But we're just going to go back to our source tape, and we're going to go find the next clip. Now I'm just going to go through and sort out all the clips here, and then I'll come back just before I move to the edit page. Okay, we're back. I've got all the footage sorted out in the right order, but I'm just going to do a final check to make sure everything looks logical. So we can just come up here, we can grab this, and we can just scrub through the timeline real quick. Make sure everything looks like it's in the right logical order. Now a few times I did have to slow down and actually listen to the dialogue, kind of confirm the right order. And there we go. It looks like it's all set up the way we wanted it. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to the Edit tab. And now in here, things work a little different. So one key combination from the keyboard you're going to want to learn is the Shift Z, which will zoom in and out of the entire timeline. So if I hit Shift Z, now we can see the entire thing. Now you do have buttons over here that will do the same thing. So that button there does basically the same thing as the Shift Z. And then you've got your detail zoom, that puts you back to where we were. And then our custom zoom, where you can decide exactly where you want it. And you got a slider bar here. So let's just back it up a little bit. So if we move this slider bar, you can see how it spreads it out, or basically it zooms you in and out. And you can also do the same thing on the keyboard. If you hit your Control plus, that zooms in, or your control minus. Well, that used to work using the minus key. For some reason it's not anymore. But the control plus still works. But either way, there is another way you can do this as well. If you hold your Alt key down, if you're on Mac, it'll be the Option key. And you can run your scroll wheel on the mouse, and that'll zoom it in or out. And if you're on a Mac, instead of your Control plus, you use the Command key. So it'd be Command plus or minus. It may still work on the Mac for the minus as well. I know there's a few little things that got broken in the Windows version on the very latest update of Resolve 17.2.2. So I imagine they'll have that fixed up on the next release. They're pretty good about doing that. When they break something, they usually have it fixed the next version. Okay, so now we can refine our edit. So the first thing that I like to do is go back and set in my intro. So now I'm going to talk for a minute about some of the other things you can set up on your interface here. So I've got power bins turned on. Now these don't come turned on by default. And what I use these for is it allows me to keep stuff that I use on every project in a handy spot. So to turn that to turn that on, we go up to View, and we scroll down and turn on the check mark for Show Power Bins. So if I click that, it'll turn it off, and you see how it disappeared from here. So we'll just go back and turn it back on. And I don't actually use smart bins, so I'm actually going to turn those off while I'm here. Okay. And you may or may not have this stuff open. This is your effects library down here. So if those aren't turned on, the controls for them are right here. So turn on the media pool. And typically when you start it up and are using it for the first time, it's not going to extend all the way down to the bottom. So when you click one or the other, it switches. But if you click this little icon here, that'll expand it down. And then when you click on Effects Library, they both stay open at the same time. So how you use this is going to really be dependent on whether you're running an ultra-wide monitor or dual monitor. It just allows you to make the best use of what screen real estate you have available to you. And the same goes on this side here too. So for your inspector, you can expand or contract that vertically as well. And if you expand it vertically, then you can add a mixer in there, or metadata will come in below it. But if you retract that, it gets rid of the metadata. So I've got the screen real estate to make use of this stuff, so I like to leave it set up like that, although I don't use the mixer here for stuff. I like to do that in Fairlight itself. Now, there are kind of various schools of thought on at what point in the video you should be doing color grading. Now, if you're going to be doing a lot of cutting stuff up, I recommend you actually do the minimal color correction now, because then you don't have to go through so many chopped up pieces of clips. Now, serious color grading is kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial, but as of DaVinci Resolve 17, they added a new feature that I use on virtually every project, because it's so easy. So I'm just going to take you real quickly into the color tab. And if you go over here, you see it's got a little A in a circle. And this is auto balance. And this actually does a really good job. And it's a good starting point that you can add. And you know, if you want to do more serious color grading, you certainly can. But this is a good starting point. And I'll be coming out with some tutorials later on how to do some basic color balance work beyond just the auto balance. So we're just gonna click on that A, and now it'll take a second before it kicks in the first time you use it. And now the A showed up and you saw that this changed a little bit. So now we got to go select each clip. So we'll select the next one, and now it'll happen almost instantly. It just seems like the first time it does it, it has to load the routines into memory. So now you see it happens as soon as we click it. So we'll just go through the clips one by one and hit that auto balance. And this just helps things look a little more even. And if you want to see what it looks like before and after, if you just have that selected, when you're only using one color correction node, then you don't really have to worry about this up here. But if you hold your control key down and hit the letter D, that deselects that. So if you watch here as I do this, you can see it come off and on. That one, there's not a lot of difference, so you're not really seeing much. Let's go to a different one where there's more of a difference, I think. So yeah, you can see how it affects it when you turn it off and on. And to turn it back on, you're just hitting Control D again. It's just a toggle. Okay, so we're going to go back to the edit page. And now we're going to add some stuff here. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to open up my client's power bin, and we've got an intro that we always put in. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to double click it so that it displays it here, and then I'm going to do a smart insert. So that's just done with the F9 key or your edit menu, and click on it here. So we'll just insert that. And now if you just want it to kind of transition from one to the other, you can do that. But I like to kind of smooth things out a little bit. So just to back it up a tiny little bit here. So you can see it just kind of jumps from one to the other, and that can be kind of jarring. So there's a number of things you can do. You've got little handles available at the top of these clips when you hover over them. So if you, let me just get that playhead out of the way here. So if you hover over that, you'll see how your pointer changes. So then you can just drag that, and when you're looking at the numbers there that are changing underneath it, that's seconds and frames. So normally if you want to do like a 10 or 15 frame fade in, that's usually a pretty good number. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit here so we've got better, finer control. So now you see I can get it right to the 15 frames. And then you could fade this out as well, say 10 frames. So now we'll just look at this again.
Coming on location here.
So you see how that's not quite so jarring.
Coming on location.
Now I'm going to do something a little more advanced here. So I'm going to use an actual video transition. This is one that I designed, but you can use any of the built-in ones here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to take this video and I need to overlap it on this one to be able to use a transition. Now my particular transition takes up 2 seconds or 60 frames. because we're working at 30 frames per second. So I'm just going to grab this and start dragging it, and you'll see that little number below the mouse there. It's showing my frames and seconds. So I'm going to take it to actually 2 seconds and 2 frames. There's a little quirk in that if I want a full 2-second transition, I have to have a couple extra frames, one on each side, for it to allow me the full 2 seconds. Not sure why that happens, but it is what it is. And now we're just going to take this and we'll click and drag this to 1 second and 1 frame. And now I can take this preset that I've built here and make sure that it's hovered right on the middle. And now I have to go do a real quick thing in Fusion for this, just a little quirk. No, you normally wouldn't have to do this until you get into doing more advanced stuff, so I just have to open this transition in the Fusion tab, remove that, and then drag a new one in. Oops. There we go. Okay, now we can go back to that tab. And so now what we have is, now I got to play it a second time because the first time you go to play it, it has to render it at the same time. So now that it's rendered, it'll play smoothly. And then we're going to add a little bit of sound effects to it. Now this is something I always like to do on my edits. Sound, even if it's subtle in the background, it kind of fills it out, adds another dimension to it. So I just I have a couple sounds attached to this, and you notice how it's kind of jumping as I move it back and forth. This is because I've got the snap tool turned on, which is this little icon right here, and that snaps it into the correct position. You can also turn that off with the keyboard with the letter N. So we'll just drag in the second one, get it aligned at the end. And I've got to turn this track down a bit because it's going to be too loud. So to do that, I mean, you can adjust the volume individually for sound. You can grab it here and drag it to whatever level you want, higher or lower. But if you've got a lot of sound and it all needs to be brought down about the same level, it's easier to do it at the track level. So you can just click on the track over here and then go up here to inspector. And it's not open. Just click on the inspector link up there, and that'll open it. And then we can drop it down. I'm going to drop it down to about -5. And now if we play this again, you'll see how it's kind of added a whole new dimension to that transition. So now, when we get to the right position here, we're going to be adding some text to kind of let people know some extra information. But I need to find those spots, and don't really need to make you suffer through that. So we'll pick it back up when I find the first spot I need to do that in. See if this is the right spot.
The small hose are 290. They're big.
Okay, so as he's talking about this stuff, I'm going to take a little text and pop it up on top. So I'm just going to grab over here. I've got a text tool kind of already set up as a favorite, but you can just do it here where you go to titles. Oh, here we go. It's right at the top. So we can just take the basic text and we can drag it in. And I don't know if you noticed, but when you're scrubbing over these here, it'll show you like a preview, kind of what it's going to look like. So that just helps save you a little time so you don't have to actually try them all out before you can see what they're going to do. Now when you bring these in, they usually default to 5 seconds, but you can stretch them or shrink them as needed. So you would just grab onto the end of it and set it to whatever size you wanted. But 5 seconds is actually usually a pretty good amount of time. So we'll just leave it at that. Not letting me, I guess it doesn't really matter if it's 1 frame off. Okay, so then we just go up here to our inspector and we put in the text that we want it to have. So in this case, it's going to be a John Deere 290G excavator. And then we can go down here and choose the font that we want. So the font that I kind of like for situations like this is either Impact or Arial Black, either one. And then I'm going to set a color. And then you notice you've got a few other little options down here that you can add in. So I'm just going to add a little bit of drop shadow. So I'm just going to, and you want it fairly subtle, so I'm going to go 5 on the X and -7 on the Y. And that's basically giving us a light source from looking like it's from the top left going down and right. And then we're just going to get our blur the way we want it. We don't want a lot of blur, but we don't want it real sharp like that. So make it subtle. And then we're going to adjust it. So see where it says position here. So I'm just going to put it up at the top. Now you can see that drop shadow a little better. Now you can add an outline to the letters, but it's not something that I normally use for this, but you got the freedom. I'm just going to turn them off so they're not taking up resources. Now there's a nice little trick that you can do to animate this. Really, really easy right on the edit tab. So what we're going to do is go to video transitions. And then we can go down to push. And we're just going to drag that right to the end here. Now this is going to be way too long, so I'm just going to select that and I'm going to bring that down to 7 frames. And then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to tell it to push up. And then I'm going to set a tiny bit of motion blur. And we're just going to, we got to turn off the snapping tool here so it's not forcing us to a position we don't want. So I'm just going to stick it in the middle and see how much blur. So that looks like a little too much. So I'm going to type it in manually at a 0.05. And I just hit the tab key. Yeah, that looks like a good motion blur there. So we'll go with that. And then I'm just going to highlight this again here. And then we're going to ease out. And what I mean by that of easing out is it's going to start in fast and then it's going to slow down when it gets to its final position. And that just makes it so it's not kind of robotic and linear looking. It just makes it look more natural. And then another little trick we can do, I'm just going to move the playhead out of the way. If we click on this again, and if we hold our Alt key down, or Option if you're on the Mac. Oops, I accidentally clicked on that little diamond thing there. That's a whole nother tutorial. So we're just going to hold the Option key down and we're going to drag this. And it doesn't look like anything's happening, but once you get to the other end, you'll see it shows up. So what we've done is we've made a copy just by dragging with the Alt key. And we're going to select this one and we're going to change this to push down. And then we're going to go ease in. So it's going to start slow and then speed up as it goes off screen. So now let's take a look at that and see what it looks like. See how it just pops in real fast?
Not nearly as big as a 470.
And it's going to pop back out. It just gets the viewer's attention, but you don't want to make it too long or it can be distracting. So that's why I like to use 7 frames, but I mean you can use whatever works for you. It's just over time I found that that seems to be a good balance. And then once again I'm going to add some sound to that. So I'm going to make sure I turn my snapping back on. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to get my little fast whoosh. So it's basically just a swish. And then once again I can make a copy and just hold the Alt key down and drag it over. And then if for some reason I need to move this later on, I want to connect them together. So if I click, so see this one's highlighted in red, that means it's selected. So if I hold my Control key down and click on this one and then click on this one, now I've got all 3 selected. So I can just right click and then select Link Clips. So now if I move it, if it's not selected and I come back and I just hit one of them, all 3 get selected. And then I can move everything at once. And now we'll just double check and make sure it's actually coming in at the right time.
Not nearly as big as a 470.
So I think this back here is where he mentions the name.
The small O is a 290.
Yeah, so we'll actually just line that back up over here. And now I'm going to make a copy of this and then just change the text because he mentions the other one in the next breath here. So I'm just going to hold my Option key down. This will drag the copy, we'll kind of line it up. You notice here you can see visually when he starts talking again. So we're just kind of lining it up there. And we're going to go to, let's see, video. And now we can change the text here. And we're going to change that to 470. Okay, so now we'll just play this sequence and make sure it all makes sense.
The small O is a 290. They're big. Not nearly as big as a 470.
And there we go. That didn't take very long. It's pretty easy to do. And once you get used to it, you can run through this stuff pretty quickly on an edit. So now basically we're just going to be doing more of the same. So I'm going to cut away until I'm at the next point where I've got something I need to show you. So I got something else real quick that I wanted to show you. There's another little transition we can use here that, because we're not going for major change between videos, I don't want to use that full 2-second stinger style transition. So we're going to do something a little more subtle. So because we had slid the other one over before, this one was actually kind of sitting over here. So with making sure our snapping is on, we're going to join them together here. And then I'm going to grab it again and I'm just going to move it 6 frames. And then I'm going to pull it back in the middle there. I'll have to turn off snapping. I'm just going to pull this back so that that's right in the middle of that. So it's at 3 frames. And then we can take, on video transitions, we're looking for a smooth cut. So we can just drag that right into the middle there. Now we'll just zoom in a bit closer. So you can see that even though we moved it 6 frames, it only put it in at 4 frames. Now, if you want to make life a little easier on yourself, smooth cut is really good, because if you're, say, editing a talking head video and you're not able to match the face between where you have to make a cut, a smooth cut will make it almost disappear, can make it almost imperceptible. So it's something that I use an awful lot of. So if we take and right click on this, we can actually create a transition preset. So you just click that, you give it a name, and hit OK, and then it'll show up in the user section over here. So if we scroll down a bit more, you see where it says user. So now you'll see there's a smooth cut there, and then you can click on this little star and it'll show up in the favorites. But when you make it a preset, it can now actually show up automatically when you right click on a transition. So if we just delete that and I go right here and then I right click, so now I can add that 4 frame smooth cut, and you can actually choose some other ones. So now if you just watch what happens when it switches, it's just a very subtle kind of a morph, which makes a really neat little transition.
Okay.
So just watch that again.
Morning. So
oh, went too far. And to kind of scroll back the timeline, I'm just holding my control key down and running the mouse wheel. So we just watch that again real quick. See how that just kind of morphs from one to the other? That's a particular favorite of mine. But I mean, you've got all these other transitions that you can use. And once again, if I go to the middle here, and if I scroll over it, it'll show you right on screen what that one's going to look like. So like there's an X wipe and Venetian blinds. So this way you don't have to go try them all one at a time to find the one you like. So you can play with this. But it's been my experience that usually less is more with this kind of stuff. When I first started editing, I was using all kinds of real fancy ones, but it was kind of nice, but I way overused them. So something subtle like this, it lets you use a transition at every swap over, but it doesn't kind of take away from the video. Okay, so I'm going to just cut away for a little bit again, and I'm going to finish this up until I get to the next spot. So I'll be right back. Okay, I realized that I actually missed giving you a vital piece of information for being able to right click and have this be smooth cut. So you actually have to go to the preset that you made over here, and then we're going to right click on it, and then we're going to choose set as standard transition. Sorry about that. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, now there's one thing that I wanted to show you that I don't actually need for this video. I didn't really have to do any other cuts. However, you know, cutting video is actually going to be very important to most of you. So we'll just go through that real quickly here before I show you the finishing steps on this video. So when you get to a spot that you want to cut, you would just move your playhead to where you want to do the cut. Let's just say right there. And then you can do a couple of different things. You can either click on the little razor blade here, and then see that very faint red line at the end of the razor blade. So you just line that up to where you want to make the cut. So let's say right here. So we would click that, and you see how it makes a cut there. Now there's other ways to do it as well. So we'll just go back and choose the little arrow or selection mode here. And then I'm going to hit Control Z to get rid of that cut. Now the other way you can do it is you can actually hold your control key down and hit B. So that'll cut it as well. So if we just scroll off, you can see that it's actually cut there. And then we'll go down here and we'll make another cut. So control B again. And then this part that you're cutting out, you want to get rid of it. And there's two different ways you can do that. You can hit the delete key on the keyboard, and then you would have to make sure your snapping is turned on. Grab this here and move it over so it's butted up against the end where you cut. Or we'll just bring that back. So we're going to make sure that this is selected. And then instead of hitting the delete key, which was actually what I meant to say was the backspace key. Some keyboards it shows it as being the delete key, but it's actually the backspace key. And that's kind of on the main part of where your keys are. And then you've got that little section of keys in the middle above your arrow keys, and you got another delete key there. And that's actually the real delete key. So if you hit that one, then it does what's called a ripple delete. And then that kind of does all the work for you. It pulls it out and slides everything over that was on the right. And that's basically the essence of making your cuts. And then you could, once again, you could do a regular transition, or you could right click and do the smooth cut. If you do a regular transition, you got a couple of choices. You can either drag one in. So we're just going to test it, see what this looks like. So now this is one that this is like a favorite that I kind of pre-built. So it's got some changes. I created that little red border. So you can either drag it in like this, or as long as you've got your playhead anywhere near where you made the cut, you can just double click it and it'll put it in for you. So now if we just let it play, so there's our transition. So that's basically the flow of that you're going to be using when you're doing cuts. Now I don't actually need these cuts, so I'm just going to hit Control Z a few times to reverse all of those changes. And now I'm going to kind of show you some final steps here. So I'm just going to scroll to the end here, and I'm going to take this and I'm just going to do a 15 frame fade, so a half a second. And then I've got an outro at the end that we use for this particular client's videos. So we'll just move that to the end. Now normally you can just butt it up here, but I'm actually going to put it on a different track because the volume is quite a bit louder than the audio, and this is going to be important in a couple of moments here. But we'll get to that in a second. Okay, now I've got a few other little finishing touches that we're going to add. So I've got a little thing that he allows me to put on his videos. It says who edited it. I'm just going to slide that in here. This is actually a little animated, like it is just a text node, but I did a little animation in it, and then I saved that in my power bin. So it's pretty basic. It just, you'll notice it's going to drop down from the top, bounce a little bit, and then it's going to, at the end, it's going to take off to the left.
So hurry up and wait to go get unloaded near the end of the process here.
So it's kind of simple and subtle, but we're also going to add some sound effects to this. So I just got to get it to the right spot. So just before it actually hits the ground, so to speak. I'm just going to make sure my snapping is on. And then I'm going to go up and grab the sound effect. Now this sound effect is in mono, so I'm actually going to move it to a separate audio track. And you'll notice here that you got a little 1. And that tells you that it's in mono. But if you've got a track that you've been using for something else and it's in stereo, which is indicated by the 2, then we can just right click on it and go change track type, and then you can choose mono, stereo. Now these ones here, 5.1 and 7.1 surround, that's not going to be available in the free version, just mono and stereo. And I think adaptive. So we add that little effect there, and then we're going to move to the end part here. And just before it starts to move again, then I'm going to add my little swish. Okay, and now you'll see what kind of a difference that makes.
So hurry up and wait to go get unloaded. Near the end of the process here.
So it's subtle, but it really does add a whole other dimension to those effects. And so now we've got another little thing we're going to add here. So this is another fusion animation that I built, that I reuse heavily. And this transition I'm just going to show you here is actually available on my website for free. You can download it. So if you're interested in that, you can just go to www.fuzzed.ca. So if I actually go over to here, there you can see the address, so you type it in right. There'll actually be a link down in the description as well. Now this here, it's kind of an interesting little animation. Get your couple boxes. But now you can actually come in here. If you click on this, I built this with a control interface, so you can actually change all of this. So you can come in here and change the text, and you can change the font. So if I just quickly, as I scroll through them, choose the different fonts. And you can change the size, the tracking. Sometimes when you change fonts, it changes the position of it. So there's actually, you can make some adjustments here. So you can move it back and forth, or sorry, up and down. You can also move it back and forth. And that goes for the other one as well. And you can also change that outline color, and you can change the color of the text. You can change the color of these boxes. You can change the color of this background. And you notice there was that little green bar that kind of wipes across the text, makes it appear or disappear. So you can change the color of that as well. So if you scroll down, you can see, and all these different effects here. You can come in and you can even change the shadow, make it a bigger shadow, change the color of the shadow. You've got a lot of ability to control this. Now I'm not going to get into how all the controls work here. If you go to my YouTube channel, I've got a video on there that shows you how to use this. You can also get to that from the website. So, and you see that everything's labeled nice and neat. So it's pretty easy to use. And then once you get it set up the way you like it, then you can just drag it into your power bin, and then it'll always be the same for you. yet you can make changes to it when you want. When it's actually added, like if you install this, I'll actually have to put some new instructions on there on how to install. I've got to actually package it up for DaVinci 17 right now. It's set up for adding to DaVinci 16, but by the time you see this, that package should be available. So once it's installed, it'll show up under titles, and it's called the FD for Fuzzee D, 2-line text reveal with 2 outlines. Now there's actually a free version and a pro version. The pro version has all the extra adjustments on it. The free version doesn't. And I think I might be remembering wrong, but I think I'm only charging $5 for the pro version. So now we've got some sound effects that will be included in the package. Actually, do I have that down here? Yeah, here it is. So let's just drag that in. And just extend that. So now it gives it a whole different feel when the sound effects are added.
Smart bird, those things.
It's subtle, but it does completely change it. And then we're just going to add our little call to action animation. We'll go right here. And just because of I did this as a standalone video with the alpha channel built in, so, and that doesn't let you keep the sound attached to it, yet it still creates a blank soundtrack. So unfortunately I have to have the separate soundtrack for it that I can drag in and connect. Now if this is something that you might want, I'm actually going to be fixing that. As of DaVinci 17, there's other ways that I can do this now. That means I can have the sound kind of connected in with it. But if you have an interest in this little animation, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll make it available, and it'll be available for free. I'm probably going to do a little tutorial at some point in the near future, show you how to build one of these. That way you could make your own if you want. And the other thing that we're going to do before I forget is we're going to link these groups together in case I need to move them at some point. Probably won't, but it's just a good practice to be in, to link your stuff. And if you ever need to select something individually once it's linked, if you just hold your control key down, or sorry, if you hold your alt key down and click on it, it'll select it without selecting the whole thing. But it still is linked. Now I'm just going to grab my little handles here, and I'm going to give me a 10 frame fade in at the beginning and a 15 frame fade out. Sorry about all the noise suddenly showing up outside. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. We have a daycare that's not too far from here, so every once in a while they bring the kids along the street. So it's just the way she goes. So now we can take this as actually all of the, well, these two animations, you can actually move them around. So if we click on this one and then go up to video, under the inspector there. Then I can actually drag this down. If I want to maybe shrink that a little in size, like so, and then just drag it down to where the hand is just above the bottom there. So now we'll just play these three together, and this is typically something that a lot of people will do if you're doing this for YouTube.
They're smart birds, those things. So hurry up and wait to go get unloaded near the end of the process here.
And once again, this is one that I built as well. And I don't remember if I've got this one available on my website for download. I don't think I do, because it is really, really processor intensive. And when I built this, I was still using my MacBook Pro 16-inch or 15-inch from 2016. So it brought it to its knees processing this. So I don't think I ever bothered making it available. But if it's something that you'd like, and it's something that you can just change the text in it to whatever works for you, and I would include the sound with it. So let me know if you'd like that down in the comments, and if some people say they want it, I'll make it available. So we've got a couple things left to do here. So I want to take you into the Fairlight tab, and we're just going to do some really simple stuff. And the reason we're doing this is because of YouTube. So YouTube has a kind of a ceiling on, they don't want your videos to be any louder than -14 LUFS. And honestly, I don't remember what LUFS, LUFS, I don't remember what that stands for exactly, but it's basically, it's a different type of audio level than decibels. So we're going to go into Fairlight, and we're going to make sure everything is going to fall below that. So first I'm going to Shift Z to zoom out, and then I'm going to hold my Shift key down and run my scroll wheel just to expand these out a bit so that I can see the waveforms. And then I'm just going to drag this out so I've got all three audio tracks available. So now I'm going to go into the setup. So click the little gear down here, and we're going to go down to Fairlight. Now I've already got this set up, but normally this defaults to -21 LUFS. But YouTube wants it at -14. So you would set it here and then save. And once that's done, we're going to go up here and we're going to click Reset under Loudness and then Start. And what this is going to do is these numbers here, they're going to show you what audio level you're at. And when it's showing you that you're plus or above, it's going to turn red. And it's going to show you by how much you were above. And that's based on that -14 LUFS. So we're just going to walk it back to the beginning here. And we're going to play. So now you can see that went above. Actually, sorry, I guess it doesn't turn red anymore. It changed that on version 17. Anyway, now this one, to use that transition the way I did, I had to leave it in with the main audio track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that specific audio clip, and then so I look at how much it was over by. It was plus 3.5, and so I can lower it roughly that amount, just a little bit more, and then we'll be in the safe zone. So we're just going to lower that down to say -3.8, And then we're going to reset again and start again. And then we'll go back and we'll play it again. And now you see it only went as high as minus 0.1. So as long as it's not going to a plus, then you're fine. Now the reason this is important for your YouTube videos is if you have it go above the minus 14 LUFS, then YouTube will actually compress your audio to drop that down. And that can really badly affect how your audio sounds. So you want to make sure that you do this step. So now we're going to let it continue here. We're just going to reset and start again so we've got a better idea where the rest of the levels are going. Now, just to make life simple for myself, I'm going to actually mute our track 2 and track 3 audio so that I'm only dealing with this track.
Here. Looks like I can hold it straight. One guy digging for the other guy.
Now we're just going to let it play a little bit here to see where it's maxing out at.
The small holes at 290.
And we're looking at the little peaks over here.
Not nearly as big as 70.
So it looks like probably +3 is going to be where we're at. We're just going to check a couple other spots where it looks like it might be louder.
This is the last of the cleanup of this contaminated area. What they got, I guess, is some saltwater contaminant.
So now we're actually at +4.2. So what we want to actually do here, because there's such a audio difference between these different clips, I'm actually going to take and select this one, and we're going to lower it down by about 0.7. So I'm actually just going to double click this, and then I can type it in manually. So I'm going to go -0.7, and we'll just hit the tab key. And then I'm going to do the same on this one here, because it looks like about the same loudness. So we're going to go -0.7. Okay, so now we'll hit reset and start. But now we're also going to take, so the quieter track here was +3.5. So we're going to grab this slider bar down here for audio track 1, and we're just going to subtract that down to about -3.8. Just give us a little extra room there. And then we're going to go back here and we're going to play it again.
One guy digging for the other guy. Jump a little bit. So the small holes at 290, they're big.
So now we can see that it's looking like about -0.7. Go to another spot in the track. Okay, and then we'll check this one out here.
This is the last of the cleanup of this contaminated area. What they got, I guess, is some saltwater contamination.
So it looks like we're going to be good there.
So there.
And we'll just check it against this one.
We just put in enough so my airbags look like we're up to legal weight. Pull ahead.
So it looks like we're going to be good there. So now I'm just going to reset and start again. We're going to go back to the very beginning. And since we had to adjust more than I thought we're going to have to, we'll have to take that intro and probably adjust it up again a little bit. Yeah, see, it's -4.1 now. So we're just going to select that. And we're just going to actually double click that, put in 0. Okay, so now we can go back. And now since this is too quiet, we don't need to do a reset and start again. There we go, -0.3. So that's workable. So now I'm going to turn these two tracks back on, or unmute them. And then we'll see where we're sitting here with those. So Actually, let me just reset and start those again, just so I kind of know where we're sitting. Okay, that's pretty good, minus 0.9. All right, check these. Those are fine. Check these ones here. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it looks like we're good there. So that one's a little bit loud, so we're going to take our audio track 3 and we're going to drop it down, say minus 0.4 there. And we'll just reset, start, back it up a little bit. Oh, let's turn off our snapping, back it up a tiny bit. All right. All right, that put it right at 0, so we're good there. Okay, I'm actually just going to reset and start again, just so I can see where this one's at. Yeah, that looks like it's going to be a good level. Okay, so we're just going to go back to the edit page. And I'm just going to save. So I did that with Control S. You probably already know that one because that's kind of a Windows standard thing. So now we're going to go to the Deliver tab. And when we're talking YouTube here, you want to make sure you make the right selections. So I'm going to show you the right settings to choose. And then I'm going to show you a nice little trick that'll speed up your workflow going forward. So what we want to do is we want to change our format to MP4. And now you can go with a codec of H.264. If you've got a video card that supports hardware encoding, then you can switch this to .265. And that's actually a little better compression. The only downside to using that is, yeah, it makes a shorter upload to YouTube, but it takes YouTube a little longer to process it into their WebM format. So I guess it kind of depends on how you want to do it. So for now, we'll just leave it on the .264. And of course, this is our resolution. So this is our 1080p and our frame rate. That all looks fine. And once you have those settings the way you like it, you could give your name here. So I'll actually take you through doing it this way first. So we're going to give it a name. So this is loading contaminated dirt. And then we're going to give it a location. So in this case, we've got our current projects. And then we'll save that. And then you need to go down here and click on Add to Render Queue. And then you come over here and you click on Render All. I'll bring it back when it's done rendering. All right, so it's done rendering there. So now this other little trick I want to show you. So now that we've got this kind of set up the way we like it. So I'm going to go up here, click on these 3 little dots. And then I'm going to go Save as New Preset. So then you would enter whatever you want to call this preset. So we'll put in 1080p 30 FPS, H.264, and then I'm just gonna put a little X in there because I've already got one by that name. So then you go OK, and you go back up to the three little dots, and then we go to quick exports, and then we look for that one that we just named. So where we got it here, there it is. So there's the one we added the little X to it. So then you just click that. So if you're looking quick exports, you see it's now got a check mark beside it. And now if we go back to our edit tab, so you can, right from here, you can now do a quick export without having to go through all that trouble of going to the deliver tab. So go up to the file menu and then you can select quick export. Now I made a keyboard shortcut for it, Control Alt E, so I don't even have to do this going to the menu. But that's a tutorial for another day on how to do that. So we're just going to select quick export, and then you go down to this button right at the end, you click that, and then you get a drop menu, and these are all the ones that were checked in that list. So then you can choose your new one that you created, and then you hit export, and then it'll ask you where you want to put it. So you choose your location and then render it. So since we've already rendered this, I'm not going to do that, but so that speeds up your workflow, makes your life a little easier. So I hope this helps you on learning how to do your video editing. So this was a beginner's crash course in using DaVinci Resolve 17. I hope you found this useful. Make sure you come back and check for more tutorials on DaVinci Resolve 17. We're going to be doing those as time goes forward here. If you're still using DaVinci Resolve 16, I've got a few videos on my channel for that as well. So thanks for hanging out with us today, and hope to see you soon. Bye for now.